This is Reshana Ahamad, the Trinidadian who ranked 3rd in CAPE Unit 2 Chemistry and 6th in CAPE Unit 2 Biology. Today she tells the story of how she went from doubting she could manage the sciences at the CAPE level to excelling at them, and give advice on how you can do the same.
With those exams approaching, remember that.
Did you expect to achieve any of this?
Well, really and truly, I mean, if we went back to lower six, when I first actually went on the merit list, I actually placed first in biology and third in pure in lower six. And that was an absolute shock. I mean, I definitely did not expect that the first time. And then going into the second time, I also didn't want to put like that pressure on myself to, be on the merit list again. Sometimes, you can put that pressure on yourself and feel like you have something to prove. And I kind of maintained what I had in lower six, where the merit list was never something that was on my radar in my goals. And I just wanted to do my best, and that's what happened.
So what was your reaction when you found out that you ranked in Unit 2?
In Unit 2, I was definitely very proud of myself that I, was able to, do it again. I think I definitely used that boost from Unit 1 to kind of help me stay motivated in a way. Sort of like those times when, you feel like everything is so overwhelming because CAPE is an overwhelming thing, and you feel like, you can't really do it anymore, or things are not ideal. I use that, from Unit 1 to sort of help me say that, yes, you are capable of, excelling at this, whether it's the merit list or whether it's not. And that is what really, solidified that pride at the end of, Unit 2, that I was able to do that again and, show that, you can do it twice if you just like put your mind to it. And yeah, so I was really proud of myself.
Describe the timeline of preparation for the exams, from choosing the subjects to preparing for the exams.
Well, choosing the subjects for me was actually a little bit different. I actually was not going to choose sciences for CAPE. I was going to choose like humanities. And then after speaking to my teachers and things like that, I realized that the reason I wasn't choosing sciences was because I thought I couldn't do it. And my teachers actually believed in me, and that's why I chose them. And so when I went into, doing sciences, I really told myself that, this is something that's going to be difficult. And that, fear of CAPE that people instill in you from when you're in like Form 1 and Form 2. But as I went on in it, I think preparation wise, it's a lot different from what people make it out to be. I think the main thing with preparation, it's not like constant studying, at least not what I experienced. It's a little more strategic than that. I think the major thing to do when you're in that time period between starting CAPE and mock exams, I think learning your exam is the best thing to do. I think every exam has a signature. Bio has a signature. It's very detailed. All those little, things are important. And the concepts themselves are not as difficult to understand, but it's the details and that you really need to pay attention to, and the volume of details. Like there's tons of them that you really need to commit to memory. And then chem is a little bit different, where it's kind of the opposite, where the big picture concepts are more difficult to wrap your head around, but the details are easier to understand. So, because it's like, exceptions, conditions that are integral to what you're doing. And that learning your exam and learning how to answer questions is, I think, the most important thing you can do, because you can study until, until the end of the world, and you still won't be able to answer that big 15-mark bio question, and you'll be staring at a bunch of lines and not knowing where to start. So I think learning your exam, also having people critique your answers, especially if you find teachers that have been markers previously or do mark CAPE, that is really important. Having people critique your answers, because then when you have people critiquing your answers, you learn what your answer is missing. So you know that the next time you can critique your own answer and know what's supposed to be in it. And then also, I think some people use mock exams as like an indicator of what they're going to do in CAPE. And I don't like to think of mock exams like that. I like to think of mock exams as a really good tool. I think mock exams is like your first study. It's like your first exam conditions. It's all of that. So it's like a trial run so that you can tweak things for like the next round, which is more important. So I think using mock exams as a tool versus as an indicator of how I'm going to do in CAPE is something that really helped me, and that like active correcting and really going through question critique. And I think for the exam itself, one thing I would say for CAPE, because CAPE is a lot about application, like they're gonna find some application questions to throw at you that you've never seen in your life. And I think that reading widely, and even if it's not reading, like watching just like random YouTube videos about something that's pertaining to biochem, math, that is really important for those application questions. Because in fact, I'll give you an example. The year that I sat the Unit 2 bio exam, in Module 3, that application question for like 10 marks was on CAR T-cell therapy for cancer treatment. And of course, like you can use the knowledge that you have. But I actually, when I was all the way back in Form 5, had watched a video on that, and that had really helped me do well and understand that question. So never be afraid to kind of explore, go outside of your syllabus, because CAPE is going to test you in that way and ask you to, apply and, take advantage of all the things that you have in front of you. You have the internet, you have textbooks, you have lots of things that will help you kind of have a leg up on those application questions that can be so daunting. So, yeah.
How do you study for tests and internal exams? Do you have a similar method?
Well, the way that I study in general, I know every single guidance counselor is going to come for me, but you see that study schedule, that does not work for me. I don't know about anybody else. I'm sure it works for some people, but for me, I think that study schedule kind of boxed me in. And I always used to overestimate how much I could do in like a time frame. And when I didn't complete it, I would feel like I'm not being productive. So for me, like setting very flexible deadlines. So knowing what I have to do, writing it out, but then saying, okay, by the end of the week, I'm going to finish all of these things. So I can pick and choose what I want to do on which day on the day is what really works for me. For me, active listening is really important because that helps me study. Also speaking out loud, explaining things to other people. So I used to help a lot of my friends and classmates with their, work, and being able to explain things to other people and like just explaining things back to yourself. That's the way that I studied for internal exams. And of course, like doing past paper questions, because 9 out of 10 times, those past papers are what's going to be in your internal exams. But yeah, that's really my way of studying.
So how do you stay motivated?
Motivated. I mean, for me, like I've never really had like a discipline problem. Like, of course, there's those days where like I have no desire to see chem or bio or pure math. But I think what's also important about CAPE and what helped me stay motivated is that I looked at that syllabus as like an adventure. So I really made that syllabus my own and part of me. And I took the syllabus that I was learning in school and I looked for it like in the real world. So, I would learn something in bio and like recall it when I see things in nature or, in chemistry. Like I like to bake, like using those things and like making those connections and seeing it in your everyday life and making it part of you. I think that makes you see how fascinating it is and makes you want to learn it and, kind of separates it from being, objectives on a syllabus to, the world around you, which really, makes you come to class every day excited to see like what's next,
So what were some challenges that you faced while preparing for these exams and how did you overcome them?
Right. Well, for me personally, I really struggle with self-doubt and, anxiety that way. I would be doing great in school and everything, but once that exam like starts to approach, I would start to feel like I'm missing something, like I should be doing more. And working myself up into that, not great mind space that things are not going to go well and that I haven't done enough when I really have. And, that's just how I am. And that also stems, I think, from like what I talked about before, where that fear that's put into you since Form 1, like CAPE is this like monster that you're gonna have to face, and it's going to be absolute suffering. I think that also is really damaging to some people like me or people who are a little bit, hyperactive like I am, because sometimes I would find myself, if things were going well, I was managing everything well, I would think that things are too easy and I would make things more difficult because I'm like, if I'm not enduring, if I'm not struggling, then I'm not doing enough, which is not true. So I would tell anybody, CAPE is difficult. It's, it's going to test your discipline, it's going to test your endurance, but it should not be suffering. And if you are managing well and looking at the facts of what you're doing, then there's no need to be anxious. And that's really what I had to commit to, kind of taking myself out of that, narrative I was spinning for myself and look at the facts. Like, I've done everything. There is nothing left for me to do. This is just me being anxious. And that is something that I had to learn in unit 1 before that bio exam, because bio was something that I really thought that I was never going to get the hang of. I had like a full meltdown, like it was tears, it was like the works. And it was all because of this anxiety that I built up for myself. And then once I let go of that and I went into the exam and I was like, I'm going to give that exam everything I have, I ended up topping the Caribbean, which was an amazing show. So it really just shows you, if you just take yourself out of that anxiety, step back, take a breath, you can really move past that.
So how do you balance school, a social life, community service, and extracurricular activities? How do you balance all of this?
It's a good question. I mean, when I was doing CAPE, we were in lockdown. So there wasn't really that much to do per se, but I definitely tried to keep up with my extracurriculars. There wasn't much like partying and things like that, or liming or anything like that. But I mean, for anybody who's in CAPE now, and you could do that, I would say like definitely, I mean, don't overdo it, but take advantage of it because these are your last years. I mean, you're not gonna see the people around you the way that they are, for who knows how long. So these are your last years to really celebrate how far you've come. So like give yourself the opportunity to do that. But also with your extracurricular activities, I think finding those extracurricular activities that kind of exercise the other parts of your brain that 4 subjects could definitely not. So those extracurricular activities that made me be creative or be social, or, things like that really helped me to be like have a decompress from using my brain in one way all the time. And so balancing it was easy because it was less of, okay, how do I juggle all these things that, I want to do versus all of these things are essential to me being balanced. So I have to make time for all of them. And I think as the year progresses, the ratio changes. So, as the year is going on, the beginning, first term, everything is kind of in balance. Second term, things are in balance too. But then, as mock exams come around, those academics kind of take precedence. And then May and June is your time to, really concentrate. So it's sort of like a balancing act based on the priorities of your time frame that I think is, more important. You can have it all. You can have a social life. You can have, those extracurricular activities. You can be an athlete or a dancer and still do exceptionally well in 4 subjects of CAPE. And if you don't give yourself the opportunity to have those avenues to do something else, you're going to start to resent CAPE, which is something you definitely don't want to do. So I would definitely tell anyone to make time for it, even if you think you don't have the time for it.
So why did you choose to study the sciences?
Well, I mean, as I said before, I really wasn't thinking of studying sciences because I really thought that I was not capable of doing it. I thought I wasn't good enough to study biochem at CAPE level. And the primary reason why I started studying sciences at CAPE was because I knew I couldn't go back to it if I wanted to do it. And I know that sounds like strange, like, oh, you chose this subject just because you couldn't go back to it. But because I didn't know what I wanted to do in life, I realized, sciences are so like foundational. They build on each other and they're not things that you can go back to easily. I mean, you definitely can with a lot of work, but you can't go back easily to them. And even if I wanted to change into the humanities, I could go back to those at any point. And so that was the initial reason why I started studying sciences. But then I fell in love with it once I got into it. It opened my eyes to so many things. It made me so fascinated about the world and its applications and how we, manipulate the world to ourselves. And, it was definitely the right choice. And I would definitely tell all those teachers that told me, Reshana, do sciences. Don't, like, you can go back to humanities whenever you want. Who steered me into that direction, a big thank you, because they saw the potential in me that I didn't see in myself, and they didn't want it to go wasted or unnoticed. And sometimes, when choosing subjects, choosing sciences, it can be daunting, but I think speaking to people who have done it before, who have excelled in it, and who will give you the honest truth about it and not this jaded thing like, oh, it's hard, don't do it, is a good option if you're choosing subjects at CAPE. So someone would really give you an honest review of what it's supposed to be like and show you, the real side of things before you make your decision.
So what are you currently doing now since you have left high school?
Well, I took a gap year after high school, so I'm currently in my gap year. I was not ready for university, those 2 years of COVID, being mature enough to go off to university. I definitely was not. So in my gap year, I've been doing a lot of the things that I would not have had the opportunity to do when I was in CAPE. So I'm learning sign language. I'm in level 2 sign language. I'm the president of a nonprofit youth charity organization called AT&T. So if there's any Trinis out there watching, come join AT&T. Check us on Instagram. And I'm actually teaching a private candidate CSET chemistry. as well. And beyond that, just like taking some time for myself before that, rush of university.
So what's one advice that you would give to students sitting CXC this year?
Right. Well, I mean, I think it's impossible to give like one piece of advice, but I think for those people who are starting CAPE, I mean, CSEC is one thing, but going from CSEC to CAPE is a very big transition. And I think going from Form 5, you are very capable of these things. You just have to find what works for you. If you're somebody who is striving for, the merit list, or if you're just somebody striving to do well, I think the best thing to do is to remember that that long paper is your time to shine. That long paper is where you leave everything. You didn't go through all of this work in CAPE to hold back on that long paper. Show them who you are on that long paper. Show them how much you can give. And I mean, I'm not saying like don't finish the exam, but really show them who you are and what you're made of on that long paper and give it all that you have so that you can say at the end of the day that I did my best. If you're somebody who, is striving for that merit list and wants to know the secret, I couldn't tell you because I didn't strive for the merit list. I ended up on it. But what I will say is that the merit, and it's somebody told me this, I can't remember who, I would give them credit for it because I believe in this wholly and solely. The merit list is not about intelligence. And I'm not saying that the people who are on the merit list are not incredibly intelligent. They are, and they're so talented and brilliant students. But there are so many other just as brilliant students out there who don't make it in that 10. And it's because the merit list is really about perfection on that day, at that specific time, in that exact exam. That's what happened, and that person was perfect on that day, and that's how they got on the merit list. So for those people who may not achieve that merit list, even though they were striving for it, just remember that perfect is not how we build things. Perfect is not how we, are successful at life. Intelligence, discipline, intelligence, not only in academics, but discipline, hard work, and creativity, and all of those things are how we're successful at many things. So if you don't make that merit list, just remember that. And don't let anybody, if you've been on the merit list before, put that pressure on you to be on the merit list again. Use that to motivate you in those times when you feel down, that you are capable of a lot, and that, you can go forward and excel even if you don't make it on that merit list the second